President been called so many times to come out and speak after these mass shootings. Here he comes again.
Today, as Americans, we grieve the brutal murder, a horrific massacre of dozens of innocent people. We pray for the families who are grasping for answers with broken hearts. We stand with the people of Orlando who have endured a terrible attack on their city. Although it's still early in the investigation, we know enough to say that this was an act of terror and an act of hate. And as Americans, we are united in grief, in outrage, and in resolve to defend our people. I just finished a meeting with FBI Director Comey and my Homeland Security and National Security advisors. The FBI is on the scene and leading the investigation in partnership with local law enforcement. I've directed that the full resources of the federal government be made available for this investigation. We are still learning all the facts. This is an open investigation. We've reached no definitive judgment on the precise motivations of the killer. The FBI is appropriately investigating this as an act of terrorism, and I've directed that we must spare no effort to determine what, if any, inspiration or association this killer may have had with terrorist groups. What is clear is that he was a person filled with hatred. Over the coming days, we will uncover why and how this happened, and we will go wherever the facts lead us. This morning I spoke with my good friend Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, and I conveyed to him the deepest condolences of the American people. This could have been any one of our communities. So I told Mayor Dyer that whatever help he and the people of Orlando need, they are going to get it. As a country, we will be there for the people of Orlando today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come. We also express our profound gratitude to all the police and first responders who rushed to harm's way. Their courage and professionalism saved lives and kept the carnage from being even worse. It's the kind of sacrifice that our law enforcement professionals make every single day for all of us, and we can never thank them enough. This is an especially heartbreaking day for all of our friends, our fellow Americans who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. The shooter targeted a nightclub where people came together to be with friends, to dance and to sing, and to live. The place where they were attacked is more than a nightclub. It is a place of solidarity and empowerment where people have come together to raise awareness, to speak their minds, and to advocate for their civil rights. So this is a sobering reminder that attacks on any American, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation, is an attack on all of us and on the fundamental values of equality and dignity that define us as a country. And no act of hate or terror will ever change who we are or the values that make us Americans. Today marks the most deadly shooting in American history. The shooter was apparently armed with a handgun and a powerful assault rifle. This massacre is therefore a further reminder of how easy it is for someone to get their hands on a weapon that lets them shoot people in a school, or in a house of worship, or a movie theater, or in a nightclub. And we have to decide if that's the kind of country we want to be. And to actively do nothing is a decision as well. In the coming hours and days, we'll learn about the victims of this tragedy. Their names, their faces, who they were, the joy that they brought to families and to friends, and the difference that they made in this world. Say a prayer for them, and say a prayer for their families. May God give them the strength to bear the unbearable, and that He give us all the strength to be there for them, and the strength and courage to change. We need to demonstrate that we are defined more as a country by the way they live their lives than by the hate of the man who took them from us. As we go together, we will draw inspiration from heroic and selfless acts. Friends who helped friends, took care of each other, and saved lives. In the face of hate and violence, we will love one another. We will not give in to fear or turn against each other. Instead, we will stand united as Americans to protect our people and defend our nation and to take action against those who threaten us. May God bless the Americans we lost this morning. May He comfort their families. May God continue to watch over this country that we love. Thank you.
President Obama not taking any questions there in the briefing room, saying this was an act of terror, brutal murder, and act of hate, being treated as an act of terror, even though he says it's an open investigation and no definitive judgment yet on why exactly this person acted as he did, killed so many people last night in Orlando. He said what is clear is that he was a person full of hatred. The president also reaching out to the gay community as well and saying this was an attack on all of us as Americans. Brian Ross, the president, quite careful there.
Very careful in describing what we know about him. We've just learned as the president was speaking, he did work for a Florida security company and had worked there since 2007, so for almost 9 years. His job has been protecting lives. Last night he took lives.
That's right. The company G4S and his employers put out a statement saying they're shocked and saddened by the tragic event and saying they're completely working now with law enforcement authorities. And presumably in that job he could have learned something about areas like this and what kind of precautions might have been taken that he could evade.
That would give him legal protection and cover and authority to have weapons, to train with weapons, because after all his job as a security guard was to provide security. He would well known what security is in a situation like that and how to get around it.
I want to go back to John Carl at the White House. And John, just before the president stepped out on the podium as we were talking, this is coming in an election year as well, and just before he stepped out, another tweet from Donald Trump saying, is President Obama finally going to mention the words radical Islamic terrorism? If he doesn't, he should immediately resign in disgrace. As we saw, the president not prepared to reach any final conclusions, simply calling an act of terror and an act of hate.
Yeah, absolutely. The president calling it an act of terrorism. The question, of course, is whether or not there were any ties to international terrorism, groups like ISIS, whether there was any inspiration to international terrorist groups such as ISIS. The president came into the briefing room just after having met with FBI Director James Comey and his Homeland Security team in the Oval Office, looking at that very question. The president not willing to go that far, but making it clear whatever this is, this was terrorism. This was clearly an act of hate, and it's notable that this president has declared this month the National LGBT Pride Month. All 8 years, just did it 2 weeks ago. This is a president who has presided over the great expansion of LGBT rights. So it was notable that he mentioned where this attack took place. Again, we don't know the motivations, but this did take place, of course, in a nightclub that was popular with the LGBT community in Orlando.
Okay, John Carl, thanks very much. Piece by piece, Brad Garrett, we're learning more about this killer, Omar Martinez. Brian Ross just reported. We learned he worked at this security company, G4S Security Solutions. Perhaps could also have received training through this work.
Well, of course, probably learned, assuming he was an armed security guard, he learned how to shoot, probably been on a range. It may have given him better access, George, to acquire an AR-15. So a combination of all the above, and as Brian just mentioned, the idea of maybe the level of security at a place like this type of nightclub, which is, never is at the level of an airport or other secure facilities. Typically a uniformed officer off duty, seldom a metal detector.